My sister mocked my pregnancy for months, then tried to use my baby to impress her fiancé. She called me pathetic, body-shamed me, and ruined my baby shower, but suddenly she was the perfect aunt the moment her engagement was on the line. So I exposed her in front of everyone, including her fiancé, and now she's lost him, her job, and the perfect life she was faking. I wouldn't say my sister and I were ever close, but we kept things civil enough until my pregnancy changed everything. My name is Emily, and I've always been the more practical, goal-oriented one in my family. I met my husband, Mark, in college, and we've been together for 8 years, married for 3. We both have stable careers. He's in healthcare, and I work in finance. We'd always talked about starting a family around this time, and when I found out I was pregnant, it felt like everything was falling into place. But Jane, my 32-year-old older sister, had a different perspective on life. She was the free spirit of the family, the kind of person who backpacked across Europe on a whim, switched careers every few years, and made it her personal mission to defy traditional life choices. While I was settling into a structured, stable life, she was hopping from one passion project to another, always searching for something new and exciting. That was all fine. I respected that she wanted to live life on her terms, but what I didn't expect was how much she'd resent me for choosing a different path. It started off small. When I first announced my pregnancy, our family and friends were overjoyed. My parents were excited to become grandparents, and Mark's side of the family couldn't wait to welcome a new addition. Jane's reaction, however, was less enthusiastic. "Wow," she had said with a forced smile, "you're really jumping into the whole suburban mom thing, huh?" I brushed it off as just her being her. Jane had never been particularly sentimental, and I wasn't expecting her to be thrilled. But as the weeks passed, her comments became sharper, little jabs that didn't seem like jokes anymore. "You're only 27, Em. Don't you think it's a little early to throw your whole life away? Or, I mean, you used to be fun. Now you're just gonna be one of those moms who talks about diapers and nap schedules all day." At first, I tried to laugh it off. Jane had always been blunt, and I figured she just didn't understand my excitement. But the more she spoke, the more it became clear she wasn't just indifferent to my pregnancy, she was actively against it. She started sending me articles about women who had lost themselves after having kids, messaging me memes about moms giving up on life, and casually dropping horror stories about people who regretted becoming parents too soon. "Just looking out for you," she'd say whenever I told her to stop. But she wasn't looking out for me. She was mocking me. It wasn't just the jokes about throwing my youth away. It was the way she acted like my pregnancy was some tragic mistake, like I was ruining my potential instead of embracing the life I wanted. One day we were out grabbing coffee, and I mentioned how excited I was to start setting up the nursery. Jane rolled her eyes. "God, you sound like a middle-aged soccer mom already," she muttered. "Next thing you know, you'll be driving a minivan and wearing yoga pants every day." It stung, but I let it slide. What else could I do? I didn't need her approval to be happy. But Jane wasn't done yet. And I had no idea just how much worse things would get. At first, I thought I could just ignore Jane's negativity. Maybe she'd get bored and move on. I was wrong. As my pregnancy progressed, her comments became meaner, more personal, and impossible to ignore. It started with casual body shaming. "You're really leaning into the whole pregnant lady look, huh?" she said one day when we ran into each other at my parents' house. I looked down at myself. I was 6 months pregnant. Of course I had gained weight. "I mean, some women stay in shape while pregnant," she added, sipping her iced coffee like she hadn't just insulted me. "But I guess it's different for everyone." She was relentless. If I wore something loose and comfortable, she'd smirk and say, "Giving up already?" If I tried to dress nicely, she'd raise an eyebrow and say, "Wow, still trying? That's cute." It wasn't just the weight comments, though. She acted like having a baby made me a failure. "You used to have ambition," she sighed one evening while we were at my parents' house for dinner. "Now you're just settling. You don't even realize what you're giving up." I ignored her. I had gotten good at it by then. But Jane wasn't just saying these things to me, she was saying them to other people too. One day, a friend from college texted me out of the blue. "Hey, just checking in. Are you sure this is what you want? Having a baby is a huge deal." That caught me off guard. Of course I was sure. "What makes you ask?" I replied. "Jane was just saying she's worried you're rushing into this, that she doesn't think you've really thought it through." I felt sick. She wasn't just being cruel to my face, she was actively planting doubt in people's minds about whether I was fit to be a mom. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream at her to stop sabotaging me. But I was too exhausted. Every day felt like a battle and I didn't have the energy to fight with her. So I let it slide. That was my mistake. The baby shower disaster. My mom and best friend threw me a beautiful baby shower. It was perfect until Jane arrived. She showed up 3 hours late, clearly tipsy, and immediately started making a scene. Wow, she announced as she walked in, loud enough for everyone to hear. You look like you're ready to pop. Are you sure there's just one in there? I laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off, but she wasn't done. She plopped down on the couch, grabbed a cupcake from the dessert table and smirked. So this is what you do now? Baby showers and what? Counting down the days until your life is officially over. The room got uncomfortably quiet. Even my friends, who had mostly ignored Jane's behavior before, looked uncomfortable. I tried to change the subject, but she just kept going. She made snide comments about my swollen feet, my pregnancy cravings, even my choice of baby names. Then she looked at me, tilted her head, and said, "You know, it's not too late to change your mind." Plenty of women realized too late that they weren't cut out for this. That was it. Something inside me broke. I excused myself, rushed to the bathroom, and sobbed into my hands. I should have felt happy. This was supposed to be a celebration of my baby, a moment to share with people who loved me. Instead, Jane had turned it into a humiliation. I felt exposed, exhausted, and utterly defeated. When I finally pulled myself together and stepped out of the bathroom, Mark was waiting. His face was tight with anger. "Where is she?" he asked. I didn't even have to answer. He stormed back into the living room, and before Jane could open her mouth, he cut her off. "You need to leave. Now." Jane blinked, looking genuinely shocked. "Oh, come on. Are you serious?" "Yes." Mark's voice was sharp. "This is a baby shower. For your sister. If you can't be supportive, you shouldn't be here." Jane laughed, shaking her head. "Jesus, you're all so sensitive. It's just a joke." "No," Mark snapped. "It's not." The entire room was silent as Jane grabbed her bag and stood up. Before she left, she turned to me and smirked. "You used to be fun. Now you're just pathetic." Then she walked out. I don't remember much of the rest of the baby shower. I just remember how tired I felt. Tired of Jane's cruelty. Tired of being her punching bag. Tired of pretending this was okay. Because it wasn't. And I wasn't going to let her ruin any more of my happiness. After the baby shower disaster, I expected Jane to keep her distance. For months, she barely spoke to me, which honestly felt like a relief. I was too busy preparing for my baby's arrival to deal with her toxicity. She didn't check in, didn't ask how I was doing, and certainly didn't offer any kind of apology. It was like I didn't exist to her, and I was fine with that. Then out of nowhere, she got engaged. Her fiancé, Robert, 34M, was a successful businessman from a wealthy, family-oriented background. My parents were thrilled. He was everything they had always wanted for Jane, stable, accomplished, and from a good family. The engagement was sudden, but knowing Jane, that wasn't a shock. She had always thrown herself headfirst into new relationships, new jobs, new phases of life without much thought about the long term. What did surprise me was how her attitude toward me changed overnight. Suddenly, Jane was reaching out constantly, texting me, calling, even dropping by unannounced with expensive baby gifts. At first, I wanted to believe she had finally turned a corner, that maybe she regretted how she had treated me. But something felt off. She wasn't acting like a sister trying to make amends, she was acting like someone putting on a performance. The biggest red flag? She started posting pictures of my baby on social media. Without asking, without even mentioning it to me, she uploaded photos she had taken during one of her unexpected visits. The captions made my stomach turn. "The world's proudest aunt. Can't believe how much love I have for this little one. Being an aunt is the greatest blessing. Family is everything." It was infuriating. This was the same woman who had spent months making me feel like garbage for becoming a mom, the same woman who called my life pathetic and mocked every aspect of my pregnancy. And now she was parading my baby around online like she had been there all along? Like she actually cared? I confronted her. I asked her, "Why are you suddenly acting like the perfect aunt when you made it so clear that you didn't respect my choices?" She laughed it off. "Oh, come on, Em. You're really gonna hold a grudge? Things are different now. I'm in a new place in life. Can't we just move on?" But it wasn't about moving on. It was about how fake it all felt. I realized the truth when we were all at a family dinner one evening. Jane was gushing about my daughter, talking about how much she loved spending time with her, how important family was to her. Robert was clearly impressed, smiling as she spoke. Then he looked at me and said, "One of the things I love most about Jane is how family-oriented she is. It's so wonderful to see how much she loves her niece." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about me or my daughter. This was about Robert. Jane wasn't suddenly interested in family because she had changed. She was trying to sell him a version of herself that didn't exist. And I wasn't going to let her rewrite history. The family dinner was supposed to be a casual get-together, a chance for everyone to properly meet Robert and celebrate Jane's engagement. My parents were thrilled, fussing over every little detail while Jane played the perfect hostess. She was warm, affectionate, and every bit the charming, family-loving woman she wanted Robert to believe she was. I sat back and watched, waiting to see how far she'd take it. It didn't take long. Halfway through dinner, the conversation shifted toward family, children, and the future. Jane, as if on cue, launched into her carefully crafted narrative. "I just love being an aunt," she gushed, smiling at Robert. "Spending time with my niece has been the most rewarding experience. I never thought I'd be so attached, but she's really changed my perspective on family." Robert smiled, nodding in agreement. "That's one of the things I love most about Jane. She's always been so family-oriented. The way she talks about her niece, it's clear how much she loves her." I stared at her, feeling my stomach turn. She sat there, lying so effortlessly, rewriting the past in real time. The same woman who had called me pathetic, mocked my pregnancy, and ruined my baby shower was now pretending she had been some doting, supportive sister. She was using my daughter as a prop to impress her fiancé. I couldn't take it anymore. I put my fork down and looked directly at Robert. "Has Jane ever told you how she actually treated me during my pregnancy?" The table went silent. Jane stiffened, her smile frozen in place. "Emily." I didn't let her finish. I told Robert everything. How Jane had made fun of me for getting pregnant, how she had constantly belittled my life choices, how she had body-shamed me and gone out of her way to make me feel like I was ruining my life. I told him about the baby shower disaster, about how she showed up drunk, insulted me in front of my friends, and made me cry in the bathroom. Then I pulled out my phone. If you don't believe me, you can read the messages yourself. I scrolled through months of cruel texts, the body-shaming, the passive-aggressive insults, the warnings about how I was throwing my life away. I handed my phone to Robert and let him see the proof for himself. He took the phone, his face darkening as he read. With each message, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to anger. Jane sat there completely silent. When Robert finally looked up, his voice was quiet but firm. "Is this real?" Jane let out a nervous laugh. "Oh my God, you're seriously bringing up old jokes? That's all this is, Rob, just stupid jokes that Emily is blowing way out of proportion." I shook my head. "No, Jane. This isn't just old jokes. This is how you treated me for months. And now you're pretending to be this loving aunt when you didn't even care about me or my baby until it benefited you." Robert didn't say another word. He set the phone down, pushed his chair back, and stood up. "I need some air," he muttered, before walking out of the restaurant. Jane panicked. "Robert, wait." She shot me a glare, her face pale with fury. Then she hissed under her breath, "You've ruined everything." And just like that, she stormed out after him, leaving the rest of us sitting in stunned silence. Jane went silent after that night. No texts, no calls, nothing. At first, I thought she was just giving me the cold shoulder, punishing me for exposing her in front of Robert. But then I started hearing from everyone else. It started with a call from my mom. "Emily, I really think you need to smooth things over with your sister," she sighed, as if Jane hadn't been emotionally torturing me for months. "She's really upset. You put her in a terrible position." I nearly dropped my phone. "I put her in a terrible position? Mom, did you miss the part where she spent my entire pregnancy tearing me down? Or the part where she was blatantly lying to Robert about being a loving, devoted aunt? She made mistakes, sure," my mom admitted. "But she's struggling now. Robert won't even return her calls. Do you really want to be the reason her engagement falls apart?" That's when I realized this wasn't about me. It never had been. My parents weren't concerned about the way Jane had treated me. They weren't worried about the months of cruelty, the baby shower disaster, or the way she had manipulated everyone around her. No, the only thing that mattered was keeping the peace. But it didn't stop with my mom. Cousins, aunts, even mutual friends started reaching out with the same message. I needed to fix this. I needed to talk to Robert to explain that Jane wasn't really that bad, that I had exaggerated things in the heat of the moment. One cousin even had the audacity to suggest I should apologize. For what? I snapped. For telling the truth? You just didn't have to do it in front of Robert, they said. You embarrassed her. I was done. Done explaining myself, done justifying my actions to people who refused to acknowledge what Jane had put me through. She had spent months breaking me down, and yet I was supposed to be the one to clean up her mess? No. Not this time. So I made it clear to everyone I wasn't going to fix anything. I wasn't going to lie to Robert, I wasn't going to reach out to Jane, and I certainly wasn't going to pretend her actions hadn't hurt me just because it was inconvenient for them. And if that made me the villain in their eyes? So be it. A couple of weeks passed in silence. Jane hadn't reached out, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. My family still wasn't speaking to me unless it was to guilt-trip me into making amends, but I ignored them. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to be the one to fix this. Then, out of nowhere, Robert reached out to me. Mark and I were grabbing lunch at a cafe when I spotted him walking in. He saw us, hesitated for a moment, then made his way over. Hey, do you have a second? He asked, his tone surprisingly calm. I exchanged a glance with Mark before nodding. We stepped outside, and Robert wasted no time getting to the point. I just wanted to say, I don't blame you for what happened. It was like a weight lifted off my chest. Even though I knew deep down that I hadn't done anything wrong, the endless guilt-tripping from my family had made me question whether I had overstepped. Hearing Robert say those words felt like validation I didn't know I needed. I appreciate that, I said, exhaling slowly. But what's going on? Have you talked to Jane? He let out a humorless laugh. She's been calling and texting nonstop, but honestly, I don't know if I can move past this. Your dinner confession didn't ruin our relationship, it just made me see things clearly. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. She's always had strong opinions, he admitted. I knew that when I met her. But over the past few months I started noticing things. The way she would talk about people, always criticizing, always looking down on others who didn't fit into the life she thought was right. I nodded. That was Jane in a nutshell. At first I thought it was just her personality, he went on. But after what you told me, I realized she had been doing the same thing to me too. Always making little comments about my choices, my career, the way I dressed, the way I spoke. At first, it seemed harmless, like teasing, but I started noticing how much I was changing around her, how much I was trying to fit into the version of me she wanted. He ran a hand over his face, looking exhausted. The truth is, I was already having doubts before that night. You just gave me the push I needed to finally admit it to myself. I didn't know what to say. I had spent so long thinking Jane had just been cruel to me, but hearing Robert's experience made me realize this was who she was, not just as a sister, but as a person. Then he said something that truly shocked me. She lost her job. I blinked. What? She got fired a few days after our breakup, he explained. Apparently, she wasn't getting along with her team. She clashed with management, and things finally escalated to the point where they let her go. It made sense. Jane had never been good at taking direction or handling authority. She had jumped from job to job her whole life, always blaming the workplace, her boss, or the toxic environment whenever things didn't work out. So she lost her job and her engagement in the same week, I muttered. Robert nodded. Yeah. And according to your parents, she's not handling it well. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. She had spent months tearing me down, trying to make me feel like I was ruining my life. And now here she was watching her own life fall apart. Robert sighed. I just wanted you to know that you didn't ruin anything. Jane did this to herself. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. A week after my conversation with Robert, Jane finally reached out. A simple text. Can we talk? For a moment, I debated ignoring her. After everything, did I really want to hear her excuses? But something in me needed closure, needed to hear her say the words instead of playing the victim through our family. So I agreed to meet. I arrived at her apartment, and the moment she opened the door, I barely recognized her. She looked different. Not physically, but in the way she carried herself, less sharp, less confident. For the first time in a long while, she looked like someone who had lost control. She let me in, and for the first few minutes, we just sat in awkward silence. Then finally she sighed. You really screwed me over, you know that. She muttered. And just like that, whatever tiny shred of sympathy I might have had vanished. I let out a bitter laugh. I screwed you over? You did this to yourself, Jane. She scoffed, shaking her head. You didn't have to do it in front of Robert. You humiliated me. I leaned forward. You humiliated me for months. You made me feel like garbage while I was pregnant. You mocked my body, my choices, my life. You showed up drunk to my baby shower and made sure everyone knew how much you disapproved of me becoming a mother. And after all that, you tried to act like the perfect aunt just to impress Robert. And you're mad at me. Jane's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. I didn't ruin your life, I continued. I just told the truth. You're the one who spent months making sure I felt like I was throwing mine away. And guess what? My life is exactly what I wanted. It's happy. It's fulfilling. Meanwhile, you've lost everything because you were too busy tearing other people down to realize you were the problem. Her expression flickered, hurt, anger, something else I couldn't quite read. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she finally muttered. I sighed, shaking my head. And that's the problem, Jane. You still can't own up to it. You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now you're here, not because you're sorry, but because you don't like how it turned out for you. She didn't deny it. And that was all I needed to know. I stood up. I can't do this anymore. I can't be the one who always forgives you while you never change. Her eyes widened slightly. So that's it? You're just cutting me out of your life. I'm setting boundaries, I corrected. If you ever decide to genuinely take responsibility and show me you've changed, then maybe we can talk. But until then, I need to focus on my family. Jane didn't try to stop me as I walked to the door. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for leaving her behind. Predictably, my parents weren't thrilled when they found out. They called me a few days later, trying to do what they always did, stay neutral, keep the peace. You're sisters, my mom said. Sisters forgive each other. I had heard it so many times before. But this time, I wasn't letting it slide. Sisters also respect each other, I said. And Jane never respected me. She doesn't even think she did anything wrong. My dad sighed. We just don't want this family to fall apart. It already did, I replied. It fell apart the moment you two refused to acknowledge how badly she treated me. You keep telling me to forgive her, but have you ever once told her to apologize? To take accountability? Or is it just easier to expect me to be the bigger person? Silence. Because they knew I was right. We're not taking sides, my mom finally muttered. I let out a breath. That's fine. But I am. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bending to accommodate Jane or my family's expectations. I wasn't letting guilt dictate my choices. I had spent months feeling small, feeling worthless because of her words. But now, I felt free. Mark and I continued building the life we had dreamed of. Our baby grew, healthy and happy, surrounded by people who actually cared. And every day, I reminded myself that I had made the right choice. Jane could either face her own demons or keep running from them. That was her decision to make. But me? I was finally at peace.